Hey everyone, I said I'd be back and here I am in Blender. So it's not Unity this time around, but I did say that we were going to mess around with Blender a little bit just to help us to create elements and assets for our game. It's just the same as when we create sprites outside of Unity, except it gets a little more complicated with the 3D and everything like that. But hopefully we'll be able to get a grasp of some basic things that can help us in continuing our project and polishing it off in a nice way while learning some new skills. As you can see, I have modeled a Catman thing. It's a bipedal low poly cat, and pretty much this is going to be my character for my action adventure demo slash game slash however far we're going to take this, which is going to be pretty far. So I can show you a rendered version of this, and that's what they look like. So it probably won't look like that in the game just because that was rendered and we're going to be working with real time, but it'll give you a gist of kind of what we're going to be doing. If I go to material here, then I can see all the colors that I've added to my character just to make him look nice and pretty. Added a little cape scarf thing, half of that Victorian look that you sometimes get. And they have a little staff on their back, and arms and legs, shoes, because you have to if you're going to personify some kind of animal. And yeah, just the rest of it. I dodged the eyes just by making a little hat here, and I don't think that looks too bad, but this is going to be my working model. So now that we're back in solid mode, we're just going to get into the bulk of this part, and that is me telling you a little bit about Blender, which I have already, and telling you a little bit about rigging 3D models so that we can use them and animate them in Blender and export those animations out to Unity and have those animations run at the right time in Unity. I imagine it works the same as with our 2D animations, except we'll be animating externally just to try that out, and then maybe halfway through the project, if we figure out that we can animate internally a little bit better, we can try that. But this will just give us a whole scope of ideas to work with. So I guess I'll just go through the basics of using Blender. I'm sorry if I said Unity for Blender already, but I'm going to keep making that mistake probably. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just create a cube. So I'm going to move my cat character aside, and that's fine because I can put them back to their original transform. See, it works a lot like Unity, just a couple more features in here. So I've moved my character aside, and we can see a little cursor here, we can see a little target kind of thing, and this is our cursor. This is where objects will be created when we create them in the scene. So if I go for Shift A, then I get this add menu, and this add menu allows me to add a range of different things. We're going to go for a mesh, and we're going to go for a cube this time round. And so you can see that my cube was added in central to my cursor, and I can drag it up. Just like the gizmos that we have in Unity, we have those similar gizmos here. And so if I want to scale this, I just hit S while I have the object selected, and I can scale it down. And there's more ways to scale it. So if I hit S and then Z, I will scale it along the Z axis. If I hit SX along the X axis and SY along the Y axis. If I go S Shift Z, then it will take the two other axes, scale it along those. So it'll kind of isolate the last key that I hit and go for the axes that I didn't hit. So if I go for Y, then it's going to scale it on everything other than the Y axis. See that? And that's the same for the X axis. We have a couple of modes that we can go into. So we're going to go into this edit mode down here. So we just go to this drop down while we have our object selected and go into edit mode. And in edit mode, we are able to just fiddle around with our object in a little bit more detail. So now you can see that I can select corners of this object. So I can drag these and pull them around individually instead of just the whole object. If I want to select the whole object, I just double tap A. So deselect is A and select all is A again. We have other selection tools. So if I hit B, then I have this little target thing come up, and I can just drag along and anything that's inside the box, anything the light touches is ours, and then you can just drag that around. Another thing that might be useful for you creating your own model and character is the ability to make cuts within objects, and I'll demonstrate what I mean by this. So if I have my object here, if I hit Control and R, you see I can make some cuts in the object. And if I use my scroll wheel and go up and up and up, I have more cuts that I can make. We'll stick to this. And so when I left click, the cut is sort of selected. So it's like, okay, you've selected one cut. And then if I right click, then I just place it at the center. If I were to left click again, I would place it where my cursor had taken it, but I wanted it to be at the center this time. So one thing we could do is we could take these sides and we can just scale them in on the x-axis into here, and then we can say drag this up a little bit to make more of a smooth curve on the top of this triangle prism thing here. We can drag this down, up, all around, and it becomes its own individual thing. So we can make different cuts. I like to think of Blender as really, I mean, it's in there, it's 3D modeling, but it's kind of like working with clay in a digital realm. You have all of these options and you have all of these things that are placed in front of you, and if you want to make something, you definitely can. You just need to know what tools you need to use for that. So I can extrude sides and I can extrude faces and everything like that, and I just simply hit E. And an extrusion is pretty much, it's just pulled a duplicate out of that space. So when I extrude that, I'm not dragging the original, but I am dragging an extension of it. It's just kind of making a copy and then working with that. So we've looked at selecting corners and things. You can select whole sides themselves, and that'll equate to a face. If I wanted to, I could just select that. But that pretty much just drags out the whole face. If we want to select a face just as it is, then we can do that. Scale it, make something really ugly. If we want to look through our object while we have it in this kind of solid form, we can just hit this little button down here, and this will allow you to select sides that you wouldn't have been able to select before. See, I can select the back from looking at the front. Another way that I prefer is by going over to this viewport shading, and then I go to wireframe, and this is where we can take a more detailed look at our models. This is really good for just like making fine tweaks and just making sure that everything is kind of alright. You can see it's a little complicated in my wireframe for my character here. Hopefully that doesn't slow us down too much in the game or anything like that. But you can just take a look at the advantages of using this wireframe mode. We can go into rendered, and that just shows you a full render. I'm not going to go into that because while I record, my computer just can't take it. Go into materials, so this shows the materials. So I've just added a couple of colors under the materials option. So if I go into object mode, select my cat, then I go into material, I can take a look at all of these, and they're all diffuse BSDF materials, which means just kind of like plain, nothing too special from my experience, just plain shapes. So if I want to add a new material to my object, so I have this object selected, I can either hit new and make a new material, and then just find a color, find a different kind of a surface that I would like, so you can do many things like that. I can also select pre-used materials, and for that it's actually a really good idea to name your materials. I'm not so good at the organization part of things, so I haven't done that yet. So I'm going to go back into solid. select my cat, and then I'm going to go to this cube here. The location I'm going to change back to 0, and we're going to add some bones to our character. Before we do that, I should probably explain the theory of rigging, if we can call it that. Pretty much rigging is adding bones to your character that you can manipulate, that you can change, that you can pose. It adds kind of scaffolding to your structure. And this scaffolding allows you to make hinges, pivots, and turns, rotations. Because as you can see, my model is just one thing. If I hit G and just drag it around, you can see that it's not going to move around individually. Even if I go into the edit mode, it wouldn't quite work for me to have to select every single thing that I need and then be like, okay, now I'm going to have my cat rotate its head. Oh, okay, it's also selected that. That's not practical. So we'll go into object mode and we'll make some bones. So to add these to our scene, we're going to hit Shift A, just deselect everything, so hit A, and then Shift A, and then we're going to go to armature and single bone. And then we have this little menu come up where we can actually take a look at some things to do with our structure, our armature. I'm going to select X-ray because that's going to allow us to look through our character to see where the bones are, see what happens if I toggle that. And that's really important for reasons you probably understand. You need to actually know what skeletal structure you're adding to your character. And then for the display on the bone, so it all does the same thing, but I like to go with stick. I followed someone's tutorial a little bit ago, and this is kind of what I stuck with, and it really does seem to work. This way is a bit bulky and it kind of gets in the way with the mesh. I think stick works best for me. You can experiment with the different kinds that you would like, but for these tutorials we're just going to stick with stick. Alright, so I'll grab my stick, GZ, and what I want is it to be in the center of my character. So I'm going to scale this up, so I hit S and Z, and then I'm going to drag this down a little bit. And another thing that's similar in Blender that you can do in Unity is you can figure out which angle you want to look at your character from. So I just hit 1 and I can enter this orthographic mode or toggle it with 5 on the number pad. So if you have a number pad on your mouse keyboard thing, then you can do that. Otherwise you can go into view and just take a look at these under cameras. You can just take a look at these and select these. But if you have a number pad on your keyboard, you can just do that kind of thing. And so I'm going to scale this up on the Z-axis till I think it fits for a good spine on our character. I'm going to just center this because I don't think this is centered. Our character's a little lopsided in certain ways. So it doesn't have to be super accurate because of something that we're going to do called adding weight paint in a second, but it needs to be accurate enough. So I'm going to drag this down, and that seems pretty good. And then I'm going to get a side view. So with our different views, there's only a certain amount of number pad inputs that you can put in. So if I go to 3, then I can look at my character from the left side, and if I hit 9, then it swaps that view around. So if I hit 1, I can see my character from the front side, and if I hit 9 again, then I can see my character from the back side. And this works with all of our angles. So I hit 7 to see the top, and I hit 9 again, then it does the complete inverse. So that's how we can kind of navigate. If you're fiddling around with the numbers, that'll probably help you out a little bit, because I'm prone to actually doing that, as you'll see me do a little bit during this tutorial. I'm going to drag this spine back so that it actually acts and looks like a spine. With my spine in position, I'm going to go into edit mode with it selected, double tap A again, and then I'm going to go W, subdivide, and I'm going to choose 4 cuts. So on the side here, I just pointed to my screen, you can't see that, but on the side here we have number of cuts that comes up on our side panel, and I'm just going to select 4, and so we have 4 cuts. So this allows us to bend our character a little bit as if they were with an actual spine. Then I'm going to select this bottom node here, and just the same as we did before, I'm going to extrude it. So I'm going to hit E, and then I only want it to extrude on the x-axis, so I'm going to hit EX, drag that out, and I'll go for -0.5 because we're pedantic like that. And then for the hips, kind of the hip joint, we're going to extrude it again on the z-axis till we touch the top of the leg, just so that our leg isn't completely reliant on the hip for movement. If we just joined it straight from the hip, then every time we flex this hip, we would get a little bit of movement down here, and that's not really what we're looking for in this kind of animation. We'll just end it there, and then EZ again. I'm going to take it to the knee, and I'm going to go -0.6, EZ again, take it to the ankle, and then EZ again, and then EY, and just take that to the tip of the foot till we have that. And we're gonna just grab that, drag it out. Because I have the top node selected and not the whole thing, then I can just affect that without having to worry about the other side. And I'll just do the same on the other side. Alright, now I'm in the top view, and I just want to make sure that my nodes align correctly with the tips of my feet. So I'll just drag these out here a little bit. And our hips are pretty far back. They're almost, yeah, the skeleton's outside of the character, and we can grab all of this. So if I select everything that's to do with the legs, I might need to take the feet and then just shrink them in a second, and then drag these forward to about the center of my character. That looks good. Then I can hit that top view again, select these, drag that back, and then over. Select this, drag it back, and over a little bit. There we go. We have some legs. Now, our character doesn't have a neck. If you did have a neck, you'd want to create a separate bone just for that neck, but big boy does not have a neck, so we'll just EZ our way to victory. Hit 1. Just pull that out a little bit more. There we have it. We don't really want it to come out the top of his cap. And he's got some ears. We probably shouldn't ignore that. So with those ears, we'll just kind of do the same thing that we did with those legs. We'll just have some bones going through into there. I'm going to be a little less accurate this time around, just because our ears go on a diagonal and they're not completely symmetrical, but neither were our legs. So grab this, just extrude it and extrude it. Don't fiddle with the gizmos this time around. And then select all of this and just drag it forward till it meets up with the ears. I can already see that there would be an issue. If I just select the tops of the ears, so I don't have to pull our skull bone forward, and so that it can remain straight, so we don't have any issues rotating our neck and the rest of our head. So those ears get to go forward. Nothing's really gonna be affected by the top of this, but these ears are gonna affect how our ears move. Great. Now we can think about our shoulders. So with our shoulders, we can either start from the neck or the chest. because our shoulders are actually outside over here. These are kind of the shoulders. This is just kind of part of the mass. And just looking at it from the front view, I'm going to go for the high ground on this one and just extrude like that over to where that triangle kind of comes in. Extrude like that over here, and then extrude again, and extrude again, and one more time, and then do the same thing over here. We have our arm bones, and we're gonna select everything but the actual, I guess, shoulder blade things, and bring those forward so that it's all within the actual arms. Look at it from the top, and that looks pretty good. Look at it from the front, and we just need to bring this up just a little bit. And there we go. We have created a skeleton for our character. I just realized they don't have a tail. I was gonna add a tail, but I guess I'm not. But I am going to hit Shift A again and create a completely separate bone. Select that entire bone, drag it back, go to a side view, line it up with our staff here because I think this will be important. And so we have our staff, so we're going to look at this from the back, scale it up on the Z axis by about 2.5. Then I'm going to rotate it on every axis except from the Y axis by -45 degrees. And I'm going to drag that up. And that lines up pretty well. Look at it from the top. Look at it from the side, the other side. Yeah. Don't have any issues there. And so that's the final bone, I guess, for our staff. And we have bones on our character. And now we're going to figure out how can we actually make these bones have an effect on our character. Well, it's very simple. We select our structure. So I'm going to go into object mode again. I'm going to select the mesh, which is the cat itself, and then I'm going to select the bone. And then I'm going to hit Control P, and I'm going to go with automatic weights. So if you get an error from trying to do that with Control P, then there's one of two things that you could do. So if you go into the edit mode for your actual mesh, so if I select my character, edit mode, and then hit W after selecting everything, I can then go to remove doubles under the specials menu, and this is what I needed to do initially so that I could attach this bone structure to my mesh. And there's also another solution online that talks about if you have intersecting meshes, then you just need to fix that up a little bit, but I don't think I'm quite qualified to help you troubleshoot that far. So we can select our bone structure now, and we can go into a new mode that we have. It's called pose mode. Actually, you could have accessed it a little earlier, but pose mode allows us to change the pose of our character. It's kind of like one of those dummies that artists use to figure out the positioning of the body in a certain pose. It's pretty much the same thing as here, so I can rotate these using the gizmo, and you can see it looks really gross actually. Like this, yeah, that no, not quite. So in the next part we're going to be working with weight painting, and I'll show you a brief introduction to that right now. So as I'm in pose mode, I will then select my mesh and then go into the menu over here, go into weight paint, and here you can see all of the focus for this bone. So this bone is focusing mainly on these parts on the arm. This is where the arm hinges, and that's where we put that bone, and this is where this bone finishes. Now we don't want it to be affecting this upper part of the arm. Maybe a little bit with the hand, just so that when this moves, the hand moves along with it. but the upper part is not what we want to be moving. So there's a couple of brushes that help us to fix this. So there's a subtract brush, and the colder the color, the less of an influence this has. And sometimes this is a bit gimmicky and doesn't quite work for me, but if I go like that, you can see the colors are getting colder, and so the influence, if I just really just go for it, so the influence on that part of the arm is gone. And now if I go into object mode and then select this in pose mode, I can see that the movement is a little bit more exclusive to the forearm instead of any other part of the arm. And we're going to be working on that in the next part, because we're going to be adding animations and then we'll be exporting them out into Unity. So very exciting things on the way. Thank you for bearing with this part. This is not something that I am quite comfortable with yet, neither is anything that we're really doing so far. Anyway, I will be back with more parts and tutorials. So in between then and now, go ahead, practice in Blender. That has been me signing out again, and I hope you have a wonderful time working on this project. Bye.